Thank you so much, everybody, for taking time out of your busy days to come and join us this evening. I want to thank some of my councillors who are here. We've got local councillor Rob Tyler Warren, Ward 1, local councillor Nancy Henry, Ward 2, and regional councillor Ward 2, Sterling Lee, I saw somewhere. There he is. Thank you so much for coming. We've been in a marathon session today, regional councillors. We started at 8:30 this morning, and I think Councillor Lee and I left at 6. Is the meeting still going? Yeah, so here we are. I'll start with the land acknowledgement. I'd like to begin this occasion by acknowledging that land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas. More specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaty of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and collaborate and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action in acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. So I don't think I need those, so I'll just go sort of off script now. At the start of this term, I received a fairly significant promotion. I was made chair of the Police Service Board. It's something that I've been sort of wanting to be part of, at least on the board, for many years. And it happened this time around, and then I was appointed chair, which is a big honor, and it's also a much bigger job than I actually thought it was going to be. First duty that we had as a board was to hire a new chief. Chief Peter Moreira is here, still shiny and new. We hired him from Toronto, where you were a staff superintendent. You've been on the job for about
32 years.
32 years, but here, 100 days?
Just shy of 7 months.
Okay, so doing a great job looking over the organization, making some very difficult decisions, some difficult changes, and helping us move forward as policing evolves. So I want to thank Peter for coming tonight. You're very busy. We're pulled in a lot of different directions. And I expect probably a lot of questions tonight will be about policing and crime and probably homelessness and a lot of other things that are affecting us now with the changes that are happening. But please, you don't have to limit to those. You can ask any of your questions on any of the topics that come to mind. And I'm happy to do my best to answer. If I don't have the answer, I'll get the answer and get back to you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief. Do you want to say a couple of words to begin?
Sure. I have a bit of a presentation, but I want to first thank the mayor and welcome all the councillors as well. It was a great honor to be appointed to be the 9th chief of the Durham Regional Police Service. This is my hometown. I was born at Ajax Pickering Hospital, went to Ajax High School, bought my first house here, started to raise my family here, and Ajax has always been home. I still live in Durham Region, not in Ajax anymore. Can't afford it. But it was an absolute honor and a privilege to be appointed the chief of policing and come back home and serve my fellow citizens, my community. And it's been a great honor since I've been back, and I'm proud to wear this uniform. And the more I find out about our organization, the more proud I am of the work that is done day in, day out. Not without its challenges, of course, and policing continues to evolve and change, as does community expectations. But I've never seen a group of women and men more committed to that change and to understanding what the community wants, the community expectations, and how we can best serve the community. And that's the business we're in, is service. And so with that, I will start here and provide a little bit of detail. So for those people that might not be familiar with the Durham Regional Police Service, we were formed in 1974. So I am older than the Durham Regional Police Service, which was an amalgamation of a number of Durham municipal services. We are a regional police service, and we are funded through the regional tax base, but we are governed by the Durham Regional Police Services Board, and Mayor Collier is our chair of the board. We have divisional centers: East, that serves Clarington and parts of Oshawa; Central East, that serves Oshawa; Central West, which serves Whitby and parts of North Oshawa; North Durham, which is a massive, probably the biggest patrol area anywhere in Ontario. And if you think of everything from Port Perry all the way up to Gamesbridge, that's north; and west, which covers Pickering and Ajax. Next slide.
Next slide. Who's reading that?
Sorry, next slide, yeah. So my members are probably tired of hearing me say this, and I've repeated it at every opportunity that I have. But I continuously marvel at how much is done by so few people. This chart shows the authorized strength in blue for sworn and red for civilian staff in comparison to the growth of the region. That, along with the complexity of crime, has made our work more challenging, more time-consuming. Currently, we have the best weighted clearance rates amongst our peer police services, and that includes Toronto, Peel, York, all the way out to Niagara, Halton, and we have the best clearance rates for the most serious crimes, which is something we should be proud of. However, we saw a 4% decrease over the year before, and everyone else has seen double-digit decreases in terms of the number of crimes that are being solved. This should be of great concern to everybody. When you couple this with the increasing crime, it begins to paint a picture. And when you think about the resources that continue to challenge meeting that demand, it's a trend that I'm concerned about. And I use every opportunity, including opportunities to speak to our community, to better inform all of you of this. The next two slides show you some very high level of calls we receive both in Pickering and Ajax. And so because the station serves both, it's just important that you see this. I have some other stats here that I can speak about later during our question period and provide more insight on what is Ajax specific. But the increase in calls for service, the complexity in calls for service has seen our response times go up. So I have a finite number of resources. Demand continues to grow. The complexity of that demand continues to grow. The sudden influx of a number of organized crime groups into the region, into the entire GTA, especially around things like car thefts, have all increased how much work we're required to do. And at these calls as well, we're seeing complexity on the types of calls that we're attending, particularly around calls for service involving domestic situations. So that's and that slide there shows it as well. The next slide. Yep. So we want to make sure that all of you are connected and that we are connected to our community. And so we're on a number of different platforms, including Facebook, what was once called Twitter, now called X, Instagram. We also have individual Twitter or X accounts for many of our divisions and our traffic services as well. And on those, we better inform the community and the types of actions that we're taking within communities and some of the things that we're confronting, particularly around things like road safety, for instance, a very serious concern as our roads become more dense. Things like stunt driving, aggressive driving, are all critically important and impact the community's use of our roadways, and we continue to see an increase in the work going on there. And additionally, we also put out a lot of information on when to call 911 and when to call our non-emergency line, something that continues to increase the call volumes of hang-up, 911 hang-ups, continue to put a lot of pressure on our communications bureau, and so too does that generate a requirement that a police officer go check to make sure everything's okay, and not somebody who truly needs help that just can't come to the phone. So all of these things continue to make our workload rise and put stress on the system that has already been stretched to the limit. And that's the end of my very brief presentation, because I wanted to take as many questions as I could.
Thank you, Chief. I noticed a couple other councilors have arrived. We have Local Council Lisa Bauer, Ward 3. Thank you for coming. And Regional Councilor Marilyn Crawford from Ward 1. I forgot to mention Joanne Dyes, Regional Council Ward 3, is actually at a seminar or a conference in Toronto for homelessness. She sits on our homelessness task force, so she won't be here tonight, but she is attending that today. Over to Devin for some questions.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. So we did have a few questions that were submitted in advance before we get to the audience questions. I did group them by theme. So the questions could either be for both the mayor or the chief. When we get to the audience questions, you could direct them how you would like. And I'll get started on our first question received over email. And this is one that is a theme where I put two together. And the first question is both to Mayor Collier and the chief. They're from Don and Franklin. And here's the question. Don's question. As a retired senior, I am concerned about property taxes. What are your plans to get them under control? I do not believe it should be the norm to increase them. And similar in theme, Franklin's question. There is talk that Durham Region will increase property taxes in 2024. A significant portion of this is because of the needs of the police force. My question, since over 30% of Durham's total budget goes to the police already, and your expenses, as I have described, have already far outpaced the rate of population growth and crime is fairly stable, don't you think some restraint in the police budget is in order to ease the burden on property owners?
Okay. I'll do my best on this. That's a very, very deep question with a whole bunch of different parts to it. But I'll start with just saying, I mean, in an environment of 8-9% inflation, I don't think anybody's expectation of zero tax increases is going to be met. I mean, it's just not something that any level of government is going to be able to do in this climate. Everything is skyrocketing. I didn't see what the Bank of Canada announced today with the interest rates. Did they keep it the same?
They kept it the same.
Okay. But everything is going up, whether it's your groceries, whether it's fuel for your car, whether it's labor costs. We are in a unionized environment, whether it's police, region, municipality, collective agreements. I mean, we're starting at 2.25% or whatever that collective agreement is. We are a fast-growing municipality, and Ajax is going to be, in the next 10 plus years, almost 200,000 population. That's the facts. And to do that, we need to be growing our fire department. We need to be growing our operations people. There's more parks to take care of. We need to grow our police force. We need to grow the hospitals. We need to grow our EMS, transit systems, everything. That growth is not free, and it's not covered by just the assessment growth. There's been changes made by the government, Bill 108, Bill 109, Bill 23, that's reduced the amount of development charges that we as a municipality can charge on new development. So growth already didn't pay for growth. Now growth really doesn't pay for growth. So those are the challenges. And as a municipal government, our only real revenue stream is property taxes. So when we have these issues, it costs $138 million last year for us to run the town of Ajax. That's how much it costs. We have some revenue that comes in through permitting, planning fees, recreation fees, all those other things, but we still need to raise $78 million from property tax. That's the only place for it to come from. We have people asking for things like credits on looking at senior snow removal, for instance. We don't charge what the full amount is. Okay, we charge a lower rate, recognizing the fact that some seniors are on fixed income, but it still costs us $550 a home, but we only charge $300 a home. That $250 a home has to be made up through the rest of the tax base. There's a motion coming to look at a seniors property tax reduction for low-income seniors. Great thing to do. A lot of municipalities have it, but it still costs us $138 million a year to run the town. So if we give one group a break, that has to be made up somewhere else. So it's not realistic. To the point about the police, yes, 30% of the budget is for policing. It is not a cheap force to run. It's very, very complex. And I just got back from the International Association of Chiefs of Police conference last week, where we learned about, the chief talked about a few things with the complexity of policing changes. Wait till you start talking about artificial intelligence and a lot of these new things that are hitting, and all these senior crimes that are targeting seniors using AI. You get a phone call, something that sounds very much like your granddaughter in trouble asking for money, and people are falling for it. These are very complex crimes, and policing has to keep changing to keep up with them. At the same time, our force is 15% less personnel than other like forces like York, Peel. Theirs is, I think, 160 people per police officer. We are about 178, I think, 15%. Those aren't the right exact numbers, but that's just from memory. So it's very complex. Our budget right now is 9.11% increase. That's not 9.11% across the board. That's just of that 30% that's allocated to the police force. We're going to bring that down to just under 9, potentially. But that is the cost to maintain the levels of service. So I'll leave it there, and Chief, maybe you can fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I just want to pick up where the on a point the mayor made there about the complexity of crime. And so there's a finite number of resources, and over the last 10 years, the service has asked for a particular percentage, and so we're, since 2015, we're about $100 million less than what the service has asked in order to keep up with some of those demands. Demands continue to go up. We understand that many of the calls that are happening today involve a level of service that requires an urgent response, an emergency response. So it's not just that crime is going up, but the type of crimes that are going up. We've seen a dramatic increase, 14% in our emergency calls requiring an emergency response. That's significant. When we talk about violent crime, last year we went up by 7%. This year we're already trending over 8%. These are very serious issues that the police are trying to get ahead of. We understand we're not the only people in this game. Public safety is a cooperative. There's many different players in this, and we're but one part of that. And that's why I believe fundamentally in upstream services. And one of the things I keep pushing on my partners in the region is to look also at the evaluation of programs where we are spending money, right? Which programs work, which ones give us, the best outcomes for the communities we serve. And we see this all the time in the kinds of calls that tend to tie us up, things particularly involving mental health, homelessness, and addiction, right? The trifecta there that's really plaguing every community across Canada. So all of these things conspire to drive up our workload, and somebody needs to respond. We are also, by and large, the agency that comes 24/7, right? Where police officers are always working, always there, always able to respond. And so in many instances, we become the default. But to fund other things also requires some money. And so this is where we have to have these very difficult conversations. The board holds us to account. We have to justify every dollar we're spending and the programs we're spending, and we have to show the outcomes. Crime continues to evolve and push that envelope. The mayor spoke about the introduction of AI into the criminal element. Very, very concerning. I don't know if anybody watched 6 o'clock news today, but Toronto was announcing a Project Stallion in which they recovered over $160 million worth of cars. Well, we're part of that. Like all of these things require our involvement, our participation, not because we're trying to help out Toronto, but we're trying to help out our residents, because car theft is one of the things that we've seen a market increase in our communities right across the region. I know the mayor wants me to speak about Ajax, but I'm talking about the region itself, putting our police services board hat on here. But we have to deliver these services right across the region, and we're seeing a huge increase in car thefts across the region. So this is how crime continues to evolve and challenge. And when you're already starting from a deficit, these problems really compound one another. In addition to all of this, I have to tell you, I'm in the most heavily regulated industry that there is. We have not just the Police Services Act, but there's a number of different acts that I have to abide by, occupational health and safety, and all the things that a lot of employers do. It costs money to administer these programs. It costs money to make sure that we're in compliance with the adequacy standards of the province. The province is introducing a new Police Services Act. And with it comes a whole litany of things that we have to start doing and spending money on. There's also a requirement that we train and retrain and continue to train our officers almost on a continuous basis. And all of these things take officers away from the road. And again, when you're already pressured on the road to answer calls, that training adds more pressure, but it's absolutely necessary, and I'm mandated to do it. And the board holds me accountable to make sure that every officer is equipped with the equipment that they need, the training and the certifications they need in order to serve the public.
And I'm glad you brought up the new, I don't remember what it's called, but the new Police Act that's coming out next April. Because again, the province is going to direct us as a board and as a force, and all the boards and forces across the province, to have a whole slew of new things that we're going to have to do that are going to have to cost money, and these are things that are being regulated. Two other things. One, you touched on the trifecta, you called it, the homelessness, the mental health, and the drug addiction. 30% of all calls that the police respond to are not police calls. Okay, these are things that need to be dealt with at upper levels of government. We wrote letters to the province of Ontario with regards to the empath model at Ontario Shores, where we can take people who are suffering from mental health crisis and whatever and direct them exactly to the help they need right away. It was not funded in this budget this year. And in fact, my letter was not even responded to. And I sent one, we passed here at the town, we passed it at the region. It's come from many other forces to support this treatment type, which we haven't got a response. So I sent a follow-up letter yesterday saying, by the way, I haven't got a response to my letter. So maybe Mr. Bethenfalvey will have that in the next budget. I don't know, but that would be really helpful in freeing up those resources to do really what you're supposed to do. And finally is our revolving door justice system. And again, if you get the criminals off the street and they're back on the street again tomorrow, which is what happens, that's not helping. And we have asked the federal government to make these changes, and it's very difficult. Nothing really substantial has happened. There's been some minor changes to the, what's the act called?
The Bail Reform Act.
Bail Reform Act, but not enough to really give it any teeth, so.
Yeah, and just to give you an example on the point the mayor just made, which I think is an important one, 18% of all the violent crime that we solve is actually committed by somebody out on bail. So that's just violent crime, right? And that's just somebody out on a release for a violent crime, like they're out on a release for a weapons charge or something violent themselves. So we begin to see how important keeping tabs on people are. So last year, or so far this year, we've already doubled the number of bail compliance checks we've done. We've made it a priority. And so notwithstanding the fact that we've done that, we're still seeing about 18% of all violent crime committed by somebody out on bail for violent crime. So we're knocking on people's doors who are out for serious bails, keeping tabs on them. You know, I know that you know that we know that you're here in our community. That kind of thing. And so, you know, I can't tell you there's a correlation there, but that number could be much, much higher if we didn't engage in that. But every time we send officers to go do that, the officers aren't doing something else or not answering another call. And that's the trade-off we have. It's a series of compromises. And, you know, I want to minimize the number of compromises I make that impact community safety.
So I think we started with the hardest question first, which is good. So
It was a tough one. For the next question, very similar. It's directed to both of you. And I compiled two questions into one because they were in a similar theme. So first, we have from Donna. There has been a noticeable increase in the amount of homelessness on the streets in Ajax the past few years since COVID. What is being done to address this problem as it poses a health and safety concern for the residents? And then similar in that, this is from Keith. What can we do to eradicate the prison culture in the downtown Ajax area? I am concerned about the culture of snitches get stitches and the violence and selling and or use of drugs.
Okay, and I think Keith is here. So we'll answer, I think the chief will probably answer your question. I'll talk quickly about homelessness and pass it over because this is a growing concern, and we have some people here from our shelter here in Ajax that's run by the region of Durham, and thank you for all the work you do. And you were also in that 9.5-hour meeting with me today as we listened to a similar thing that's going on in Whitby. It is a big problem, and I don't pretend to know what the solution is. It's a very complex problem when you're dealing with mental health and addiction and homelessness. We had that problem compounded about a month and a half ago where we were inundated with over 500 refugees/asylum seekers that came to Ajax from Toronto as well. So our homeless population actually grew in one day by 40% when we had 70-odd people come here and we weren't able to house them, and they were, when the shelter closed, were put out on the street. That's not acceptable. Those now, it's costing the region $1 million a month to house all those people in all of our Super 8 motels and all these others around the region. And we are working on a solution. The region is opening another shelter at 1635 Dundas in Whitby. There's another 45 beds there. We're doing our part here in Ajax, Oshawa, of course, but every municipality is going to have to step up and help address this. It's not going to go away. And just simply building more housing is not going to solve the problem. The Ford government is talking about build more houses. Yeah, we're doing that. We're working hard to do that. But that's only one of the 4 pillars. Treatment is another one. And having treatment available when somebody goes for treatment is one of the #1 things that we're not addressing. And that goes back to the empath model I just talked about. So these are things at the upper levels of government that we don't control, but we really need the federal and provincial government to step up. To the refugees, the IHAP funding, a lot of the people, I think about half of them that came in came to Canada through the refugee program, which means the federal government is responsible for providing for them for the first year. They get an Ontario Works card, they get other funding sources. Well, guess what? All that money was going to Toronto, and Toronto wasn't meeting the targets, so they came here. And we get zero. The region actually still hasn't got their IHAP funding for all the Afghani and all of the Ukrainian refugees that we brought last year. We were turned down through the application process last year. And when I reached out to our MP, Mark Holland, when all these asylum seekers came about a month and a half ago, and told him, you know, you need to step up. We're getting inundated here. And the regional resources were exhausted. There was nothing left. They came out with $200 million of unfunded. They had to go and do a midterm budget, I don't know what that's called, of extra IHAP funding to help address the issue. And they immediately gave $90 million to Toronto, okay? And then they gave $40 million to Hamilton. We got zero. We have to go through the application process again that we got turned down for last year. So it is a very difficult problem. I don't know what the solution is. We have put a lot of money into different homeless initiatives through the Mayor's Gala that my wife Rose is here, who she chairs. And we've, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands we put into different initiatives, but it's considerable. And it's not really helping the situation. If anything, I feel like we might almost be attracting more from other areas. So I don't know what the solution is, but I do have a list here of some of the things we've done. So we are renting the space across the road to the region for a number of beds. There's been 222 individuals have used this shelter space, which is 96.7% of the time. And since December last year, it's provided 478 individuals somewhere to sleep out of the cold and elements. We've increased security on all of our buildings as well as the plaza area across the road. We've contracted, there's camera systems, there's staff members going around the clock. We're doing all the cleanups. We've had some major shelter or encampment cleanups. And I think the first 15 we did this year in the first quarter of the year, 8 of them were one guy. It's the same one over and over and over again, but it's a huge problem. Our cost this year, the town alone is $468,000 just in security, garbage cleanup, maintenance, and all those things to do with our homeless problem. I'm sending the region a bill because we shouldn't have to foot the cost. The region supplements Oshawa, and they are going to be supplementing Whitby. And I want to make sure those costs are recovered for us because we shouldn't be footing that entire bill. This is a regional run facility we are supporting. However, this is an unintended consequence. So I think that's all I have on that. Oh, we've developed a encampment policy because we have to go through certain steps. I don't know if you've heard about the Supreme Court ruling where everybody is entitled to housing. So we can't just go and remove somebody from a park. There's a process that has to be done and followed before we can go ahead. And part of that is offering them housing. If they don't take the shelter, then we can go through the program and get them out. So that's what I have. Can you add to the second part?
Sure. So, first of all, it's not illegal to be homeless.
No.
Which is important to know. These are people who are in our community right now and deserve our care and help. And the mayor has just spoken about many of the initiatives that just the town of Ajax has done, and this is replicated right across all of our municipalities, right across the region, even in the north part of Brock. There's many different programs there, and we're seeing this right across the board. In Ajax specifically, we've also noticed that disproportionately, this group is also victimized at an alarming rate. They're victims of crime and they're victims of exploitation and many other things. And so we're working really, really hard to identify what those needs are and to make sure that they are also delivered a standard of policing services and protection as best we can. All of this to say that we ran a project just in the downtown core of Ajax over a number of months, and we made about 44 arrests during that period of time for people who are victimized or have victimized people who are homeless or themselves are experiencing homelessness who may have victimized other people. All of this is to say that we hope that this is a conduit by which they can start getting the help that they need. But the reality is that if a person experiencing homelessness, mental health, or addiction came up to me today and said, "I really need help, please send me someplace," I have no place to send them. That's the reality. And so this is the gap within the system. And so when we talk about people who are experiencing mental health and homelessness, the top 5-6 people account for about 60% of all of our calls for service in the region. This means that we're dealing with these people over and over and over and over again. Should be of great concern because I've done a ton of research into this, and we keep statistics and we delve into it to better understand the problem. And what I've identified is that many of these people, in fact, the majority of them, are already involved with at least 5 or 6 other services. They're just not getting the support that they need. And this is where I go back to the fact that I would really like to push that before we spend any money, that we're evaluating the programs and seeing which ones have the best outcomes. Because I'd like to funnel our money into, I'm a taxpayer too. Like, I live in this region, I'm a taxpayer too. I don't want to see my taxes going up. And I want to make sure our money is being funneled to the programs that have the best outcomes for people. And the outcomes are different. And what I'd like to see is no one's victimized, and people who are experiencing mental health and homelessness have the supports and the help and the care that they need, and that they themselves aren't, perpetrating the violence or making people feel unsafe within the greater community, because everybody's got businesses to run in the downtown core and everything else like that. So we're spending a great deal of time trying to understand the nature of the problem within each municipality, and including Ajax. We're spending a lot of time conducting enforcement we can and connecting people to services that regrettably are just not there in the volume that we actually need.
We have a couple more, but let's go to some of the audience questions now, because you're all here and you've taken time out. So I understand you have a question you want to ask? And we'll come back to the online ones after.
I sent in an online.
Would you like to?
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I love Ajax. Mark Holland is now the Minister of Health, in case anybody wants to knock his door and have a conversation with him about what's happening in communities, because this is it. Thank you for your explanation. My question was, particularly, like you said, the mental health homelessness, because that's really where the problem is. The refugee has a different kind of response.
Yeah.
But what's happening, like, I'll tell you right now, I went to get my tea across the street there, and as I was pulling around, waiting to go to the window, they were smoking a pipe right at the window of Tim Hortons. Over here on, I don't know, you guys keep saying downtown, they're over on Harwood and Kingston Road. Mm-hmm. And that person who's a victim, she's being pimped. I knew who she was from Oshawa. They're coming from Oshawa. I work at Oshawa. Mm-hmm. I teach at Ontario Tech, and I'm telling you, I've seen the same people. And this is what happens in Toronto. They move one group, kick them out, arrest them, and then they just leave. I'm very curious of what we do about this, because also they don't want to go in the shelters because the shelter doesn't put up with the behaviors. So my question is, what are we going to do? Because I saw somebody having sex in between the SO and the what do you call it? The bush there on the corner. And the pimp set it up in front of me while I was parked outside of the SO. And I called the police. You guys were there lickety-split. And if you want to talk to your police services, I suggest you compare the rates of response from Toronto to Durham, because it's much better out here. I just want to know, and I care for these people. Mm-hmm. They're human beings. But we don't have the infrastructure to support them here in Ajax. And it's a threat to ourselves and our kids that are walking home. So what else, what can we even do as residents to support that work?
I think you just answered the question about we don't have the resources to address everything. And the police, was there 5 tiers of calls? So I mean, yeah. the person smoking a crack pipe by the thing is lower tier when it comes to other things like domestics and car crashes and everything else. So the police have to respond on that tiered basis. I'm not going to get into much more about the homeless stuff. I've talked pretty much all I can about that. Perhaps you could talk to the human trafficking aspect a little bit, Chief. You can do so a lot better than me.
So we have a human trafficking section, and the human trafficking section essentially is dealing with organized crime, is what it is. It's organized crime who are exploiting predominantly young women, but not exclusively. And we continue to see it spread right across Canada. These young women are actually not just across our region, but across Canada, and they're regularly moved. Obviously, there's some changes in the way that the laws around human trafficking have been interpreted. Many of these young women don't see themselves as victims, which is a big concern and a massive challenge for us when we want to prosecute people. It involves multiple interdictions with these young women, and involves building a lot of trust, and so that takes time. That means that our frontline officers are engaged in forging those relationships, getting information, just getting their names sometimes can take 2 or 3 interactions before they trust you enough to do that. And so all of these things take some time to build up. And, you know, for every success story I can tell you, and Durham Region's human trafficking unit was actually featured on the 5th Estate. I'm not sure if you saw it. And it's one of the best ones in Ontario, if not Canada, and a model for other units. We spend a tremendous amount of time trying to combat human trafficking, and that extends as well to the work that we're doing in our schools with our children in the school liaison officer program, in which we begin to discuss topics like sextortion and sending an image and how that image can survive on the internet well after you delete it. These are the sort of things that get young people into this cycle of violence, this quagmire, if you will, and then they can't get themselves out, and it's one mistake after another. And so we're really working hard preventing the victimization. So not only the enforcement end of it, but trying to prevent that victimization. All this takes resources and people. So.
And I'll just point out that we're not at all unique, Ajax or the region of Durham. I've had the opportunity in the not too distant past to visit a number of cities, and whether it's St. John's, Newfoundland, or whether it's San Diego last week, or London, England, or Chicago, was that earlier in the summer, it's everywhere. This is not Ajax, this is not Durham, this is not just Canada, it's global. And everywhere you go, we're seeing the same things.
And it's internet fueled, right? So the cyber aspect of this takes a lot of time to collect that evidence and to be able to trace it back to individuals. And so all of these things, these investigations take a great deal of time and resources to complete successfully.
That resources is our tax dollars to Ajax, so the government doesn't provide anything broader for
No. But the region gets funding from the provincial government for health and social services. So yes, there is provincial funding to run the respite center and those things, but not to fund the other things that we're doing or the policing aspect. In fact, we have a $2 million hole in our budget from the province because police are responsible for policing the courts, the POA, the Provincial Offences Courts, and what they give us in Durham's case is $2 million less than what our actual cost is to perform that service. And that's a $2 million download to local and municipal taxpayers.
That's the Ford government.
That's the provincial government, whichever it may be. This is not a new thing. This is something that goes way back to the McGuinty days and beyond. I'm going to try, let's keep these a little shorter because we want to get through a few more. Is there any other questions? Let's go to the back and then we'll come back here. Yes, sir.
Question for the chief. You talked a little bit about car theft. It's starting to look like a pretty good thing,
Sorry.
He needs it.
rates keep going up.
Yep.
If you catch them.
Sorry, sir. The little people at the front just can't hear you.
If you catch them, they're back out on the street before you finish the paperwork.
That is true.
So what's the downside, and what do you see anything that there's hope in the future, near future hopefully, possibly in conjunction with other forces in Ontario, to actually get the head of the snake?
Yeah, this is all organized crime. All of this is organized crime.
Absolutely.
No one's stealing a card now to go for a joyride. This is organized crime. The provincial government gave us some funding, a grant. We're partnering with a number of different other police services to begin to address the organized crime element of this. They're very organized and they're very good at this. We're also pressuring our federal government to make changes to the requirements for automobiles. I think that a handful of really smart kids who understand computer programming can probably fix the the issue with cars being so easily replicated, that the transponder, so that people can get into it. All of this is computer-based, and I think some engineers can really help. I think the manufacturers have a responsibility in all of this as well. So we're working on a number of different fronts to try to combat this. The other thing, too, is we're really pushing the federal government to also begin to inspect shipments going out of this country, which we don't do with any degree of frequency. And we can't leave everything up to, these big joint force operations in which we're capturing a lot of cars, but by and large, volume, a lot of them are getting out and ending up. The other thing that should be of concern is that our cars are funding, and we have intelligence that tells us this, some of the illicit activity, particularly around things like terrorism around the world. There's a market for this, and there's a great deal of money being made. So, talk to your federal elected officials and pressure them to do what they can.
What about the legislative part?
Yeah, I can go on and on and on about the revolving door justice system that we have. People think of it as a property offense and criminal that is actually engaged in this. These are kids that are given computers and shown how to do this, and then they go out at night and they steal. But time and again, and what should be of great concern to all of us, and certainly concerning to me as a police leader, is the level of violence that we're starting to see in relation to this when we're capturing people. We just had last week, right here in Pickering, one of our police cars rammed by somebody stealing a car. Again, organized crime, and 3 people bailed. We got all 3, but this should be of great concern. OPP officer yesterday was hit by a car that was fleeing out west, Western Ontario. So these things are very real, and they're happening in our communities every single day.
I'll just add, then we'll have to move on. When I talk about AI and technology, artificial intelligence and technology exists to really assist in this case, but we can't use it in Canada because of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms and our Privacy Acts, okay? In other places, and I learned about this at the IACP last week, they use this technology in the US where all the camera systems can be monitored through artificial intelligence, machine learning. A machine can do in 6 hours what takes a person 250 years. Those are the stats we were given. And I won't do the whole long one, but basically, through AI, they were able to track a vehicle all the way through 3 states, through tens of thousands of cameras, just by putting in, and it does it all for you. Imagine if we could use that technology on the 401 on the way through and just have the police waiting at the bridge in Gananoque as they're on their way to Quebec and not letting them get to the St. Lawrence and be put in a shipping container. But we can't use that technology. So back to what you said, what about legislation? I think it's time for the federal government to be looking at these legislative pieces and maybe moving the bar as to where the rights are, because I think the criminals aren't afraid to use this technology, but we can't use this technology for the good, which would really help us. So I think we should be looking at that too. Let's move on. Who, over here, we had a question? Mr. Glenay? Actually, we'll need the mic.
May I use the mic?
Yes, because we have people watching online.
Thank you. There's many questions or issues I'd like to get into, but there's one fact I'd like to share instead. That in May of 2022, the power was lost to a number of areas in Durham region, but where I live on Gregory Road and Clark Road, there was no electricity for 8 days. That's 8 days when you couldn't charge your cell phone, you couldn't go on a computer, even the landline was down from the time of that. And every time I go to a public presentation by the town of Ajax or Durham Regional Police, people say, go on our site, go to X, go to Twitter, go. When you don't have any electricity, you can't do it. And much of Southern Ajax is more than 50-year-old like me, and we need help when the power's out. And the police can't expect us to contact them in an emergency if we don't have electricity. I don't know how we do it, smoke signals, but at least in your slide, that has to be reflected because that's the reality. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll start with that because I am on the board of Alexcom, which is our local hydro utility, and you talk about that DeRocha, I think it was called, that big windstorm that we had go through last year. Yeah, And unfortunately, I grew up on Gregory. You know, my parents just ate up from you, I think. That area and these established areas, all of the hydro poles and wires are above. They're in the air. They're not in the ground. Anybody that lives pretty much north of the 401, north of Highway 2, everything is buried, and in the new Lakeside subdivision and newer subdivisions. So they don't have anywhere near the occurrences of power failures as those that live in South Ajax do. I brought to the board many times, and it's not gone ahead because of cost, the going back in and burying these utilities. I've even brought up, now that Bell is down there putting fiber in everywhere, why don't we work with them? And every time we tear up a road, put the infrastructure in the road and go back. It's impossible to replace all the wires and poles behind the houses because people have built fences, pools, landscaping, everything else. It's just impossible. But we could be going through the road and connecting straight back through under the driveways or whatever through directional drilling. So it's something I continue to bring forward. It's not going to help you last year. And I don't have an answer for you other than just backup generators, which many people are getting. And that was an exception. I think the time before that was the ice storm where a lot of Ajax was out for 7-8 days. But yeah, your area was the last one. And believe me, I was hearing it from my parents on an hourly basis pretty much about when is their power coming back on. And they were working as hard as they could. But it is noted. And I will continue pushing towards that because we will need to be addressing that aging infrastructure. It's going to be very, very expensive. It's going to be reflected in rates. And it's going to take some time. Did you have anything to add as far as
No.
how to contact the police?
Yeah, I mean, obviously presents challenges, right, for all emergency services, and we are the primary point of contact for 911. The police host that for the region, and I don't think there's any great answer other than, you know, if you're really truly in a bind, always have a charger with you. Think about one of those little cigarette chargers for your car, and at very least see if you can get some juice in there to give us a call. It's not what you want to hear, I know, but regrettably, I don't control the lights or the electricity.
Next question. Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Sorry.
Just a short question. Yeah, my name is Carol. I've lived in Ajax since 1987, and I do love Ajax. But certainly, I've noticed that there's a lot of issues that have, I guess, emerged since the pandemic that I haven't seen in my previous 25 years living here. So I know it's a challenge to deal with, and yeah, it's difficult. But the question I had was just regarding addictions treatment facilities. I know that there's a terrible lack of them, and I'm wondering, is there a particular level of government that's responsible for that? Is part of the Ministry of Health? Is it private? Is it regional? Like, I'm not clear on that, so I just wondered about that.
The answer is yes, and it is provincial. The
is.
province is healthcare, the province is the hospitals, and the province is the treatments, yes. That's an MPP question.
Can I just add to that?
Please.
Canada has a 4-pillar drug strategy.
Okay.
Okay, it's a federal strategy. I encourage you to go have a look and read about it. One of the things the federal government talked about was treatment, education, harm reduction, and enforcement. So we can't enforce our way out of the drug problem. That's impossible. Education, I've seen a little bit. Harm reduction, we put all our eggs in that basket, I'll tell you right now. And there's very little in terms of treatment options. So while it is a provincial responsibility, the mayor is absolutely correct on that issue. The federal government has a 4-pillar drug strategy that I'm not sure we're still following, and is a concern that I've raised with Mark Holland, who's now our, so I have advocated on behalf of changes in a review of the 4-pillar drug strategy.
Thank you.
Sir, you were next. Sorry, I forgot.
Sorry, thank you. I'll try to be brief.
Well, sir, we have people online that want to hear, so we did need to use
Tell us a
microphone.
little bit about it.
Tax dollars seem to be thing. My stick in the game, or my skin in the game, is I moved to Durham from Scarborough in '86. '86, I paid $4,900 a year property tax. Nice place. Over $5,000 in '87. I've been paying over $5,000 since then. So I'm a taxpayer. A question about the OCPC investigation. Before I start, I want to thank you. And I think we all as a room, I can only imagine your job. I'll be very quick. The Sheriff of Durham, you got 700,000 people to look at. You've done a town hall in your first 5 months. you've got to be working 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. You've done your first town hall. As soon as that happens, Whitby, Oshawa, Clarington, the three up north, they're going to want you. I really, really want to thank you for coming tonight. This is a great thing, and I think we should all thank him for coming and giving your time. A specific question, sure. The OCPC investigation has nothing to do with you. You've inherited a service that's under investigation by the ministry for 4.5 years.
Correct.
One thing I'd like to say is that this happened differently. I've got a three-part question. 1A, 1B, 1C from a taxpayer. 1A is, I'm sure you called them as soon as you got here. They did a probe for 6 months in 2019, and in May of 2019, the ministry, the boss, said, we're sending in our enforcement branch, we're doing an investigation and an audit, basically, for alleged corrupt practices and possibly criminal behavior. Very powerful language for the ministry. Let's call it shenanigans and malfeasance. It's been 4.5 years.
Sir, please ask your question.
The
'cause we have
two
a lot of
gentlemen
people
running
waiting.
it, very expensive. Mr. Lockwood, Mr. Scott, not the Lieutenant Governor, the former SIU director. At every step of the way, the Police Services Board has hired lawyers, gone down to Osgoode Hall, and when the ministry says, we want to look in this filing cabinet, the Police Services Board spends our taxpayers' dollars, hires lawyers, and fights the legitimate investigation. Question 1A, can you give us any update? It's under investigation, I can't say anything. It's 4.5 years. Colonel Mustard is not running to Lake Ontario to dump the nightstand. Like, that's over. Is there any update you can give us, number one?
Sir,
number two,
the last
will
time
you, if I can finish, will you undertake that the
Sure.
Police Service Board will stop fighting the investigation? Stop hiring lawyers and fight the investigation.
I'll do this.
And number three, the membership, your 1,300 employees have been working under a cloud for 4.5 years. Would you consider at least telling the membership, tough times, we're gonna get through it. I wanna thank everybody for, doing the job and showing up to work. Nobody has reached out to them. Nobody. And nobody wants to work under a cloud. So that's A, B, and C. Thank you, sir, for your time.
So last time you spoke at one of my meetings, I gave you some very clear answers, and those answers are still the same. We cannot discuss an open, active investigation with the OCPC. The Ontario Civilian Police Commission. Okay, I understand you have a personal part in this, and this is the second time that you've brought this up and in a meeting, and you've had your say, and I've answered your question. We cannot comment on that. Next question, please. Not at all, but this is not the forum for your personal views. Ma'am, in the back?
Thank you. My name's Tamika Mercurius. I first want to say a big thank you to Lisa Bauer. I know she's in the room. We have been in constant communication, contact, really trying to tackle the issue of homelessness in South Ajax. I know, Mayor, you've already mentioned that you said your piece on it already, but I just want to mention it's a regional issue, and we're all facing it, and it's broader than that. However, these two shelters are immediately in an area that is constantly under growth. There are townhouses being built. There are townhouses existing. We back behind a plaza where there's garbage bins. We have open spaces owned by property owners that are underdeveloped for more than 10 years. We are so dense in this area, and it's really causing significant issues. Kids don't want to come outside and play, ride their scooters up and down the streets. Every single day, it's a challenge for us. So again, even police chief, I know patrols, again, I think I'd like to take a little part in it, like in working with council and working with staff members and trying to create solutions. But I'm selfishly just speaking about this immediate area right here. What can be done to restore a little bit of the beauty and a little bit of the vibrance that this area once had, because we're losing it. And again, it is the entire region, but both of these operating shelters are in this immediate area. And every single morning when you wake up, there are shopping carts in the street. The sidewalks are obstructed. Kids walk to school. There are people that use these streets to walk their pets that have, aids that they need to get up and down the street. And we are significantly suffering. Our quality of life is suffering. I'm just wondering what else can be done. We've had patrol programs, they've started, they've ended, it's resourcing, it's dollars. But we need some proactive support. I can say it's not a great feeling to get up every day and send Lisa an email. I know she knows it. To call the non-emergency 911 or police number every day and report these things because they are people. But we in this immediate area, we're suffering every single day, holidays, weekends. It's hard to live out here. It's hard to have visitors. People come to want to see you. It is changing our way of life. I've lived here for over 10 years in this immediate area, and I've never seen it like this. Just want to know what else can be done. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and I'm not going to argue with you at all. You are correct. I've lived in here since, well, same with the Clennings. My parents bought on Gregory Road in 1969. So 54 years since I was 1. I've grown up here. I've seen major changes. That plaza's been there my whole life. And it's really transformed in the last couple of years. We've been working very hard as a council to have that area redeveloped. And unfortunately, the Central Park development about 6 years ago went off track, not due to anything we did, just the developer that we sold the land to that was supposed to do it didn't do it, and it's been tied up in the courts ever since. We are very, very close to that being resolved. I'm also working with another owner of a section of the plaza, the Rexall section, on getting that moving ahead. The redevelopment of that area, I think, is going to go a long way in order to solving this problem. We had a delegation from the region on Monday, 2 days ago, and I asked these same questions. I think nobody's gonna disagree that this is not the perfect area to be having this, okay? But it is the building in the area that we had, and it is where we had the problem. So we've done what we had to do on a temporary basis to sort of solve that. The next step will be the redevelopment of that area. Our long-term vision is like what we have at Pat Bailey Square. Okay, the high-density, live, work, play type area, pedestrian-friendly, live, work, cafes, restaurants, that type of thing, and the pedestrian avenues on the main sections, office and commercial, and then residential above. And that will continue on through down to the GO station. It's just going to take time. But that's, I don't know if that's answered your question, but it is a work in progress. The region is looking for other locations, and I had a meeting with the operators of Christian Faith Outreach Center and the hub on, I think also on Monday. And one of the things we discussed is what can the town do? And some of the things we can do is we just passed 4 units as of right in residential neighborhoods to be able to create more housing. We've applied for funding under the housing, I don't remember the name of the program, but it's $43 million from the federal government, which I certainly hope we get, which will help quite a bit. What's it called? Housing Accelerator Fund, thank you. And we're also looking at temporary zoning in certain areas. We have I'm just in the process of reviewing the budget, which will come out to council on December the 18th and publicly on January the 3rd. And one of the items in there is doing a review of all lands, commercial and privately held, and identifying areas where we can do some forms of temporary or permanent housing, and looking at doing some changes in temporary zonings through our planning to accommodate those. So those are some of the things that we are trying to do to help move things forward. It's going to take some time, though. Yeah. Right now, we've signed a 5-year lease. And that lease is cancelable by either party within 60 days. And we're just going from there. As soon as but that area across there will be developed before that time, I'm confident. Maybe not the entire thing, but at least substantial. Sir, you've asked, I'm going to go here because you've already asked one. Please, ma'am. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And then we'll go here for the last one, and then I think we're out of time.
Thanks so much for taking my question. As you both know, and as many of us may know, there is a deep agonizing pain that many of your constituents, Muslim constituents, are facing with the ethnic cleansing and genocide that is happening right now in Palestine. As a I'll call myself a young member of this community, I am deeply concerned that there has not been adequate security that has been provided to Muslim institutions, particularly there is one Islamic school in a private school that is in the city of Ajax, and it has received no security after it has requested it following the National Council of Canadian Muslims remarks about a 1,300% increase in Islamophobic and hate crimes. I really would like a tangible answer and solution on what we're going to do, because just yesterday, someone flipped the bird at me on church in Kingston, and I don't want to get into the taxpayer discussion, all of that. We're all here, we pay taxes, but this is a real concern, and I would like to know what. I appreciate your statement that you released yesterday. It was great clarification that was needed from your initial statement, but I really would like to know what your organization is going to do.
Okay. Have you, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just start and then turn it over
please.
to Peter. Thank you for acknowledging the statement that I felt we had to say something, so that was done Monday and published yesterday. And I hope that's brought some comfort to our residents here in Ajax. To the security, we are not in the security business. If we need security for our town facilities, we go out and hire private security. We're not going to be providing security to private agencies, I'll call them. I don't mean that in any disrespectful way whatsoever, just to private residents. That's not what we do. That being said, if there are issues, the police absolutely will respond. So, Chief, over to you.
And to that end, I'm not sure if you saw our statement that we put out at the beginning of all the unrest that's happening, and we were quite clear that we were stepping up all of our patrols around all of the significant religious sites of all denominations, and that we wouldn't tolerate hate. Since this time, we have taken a very strong stance. All of our unit commanders have connected with the leaders. In particular, we said of the synagogues and the mosques within our region. And so we've made a particular effort to make sure and strengthen those relationships that we already had. All of that is to say that this is a dialogue that we've started and we're nurturing on a regular basis here with our religious communities. And when instances do happen, we take it very serious. In Pickering, just recently, we arrested a male and we charged him for some very serious offenses, and the Crown Attorney now has that to determine whether or not it constitutes hate within the criminal code, something that I can't just lay. It's something that you need the Attorney General's consent. So we continue to collect evidence and continue to follow up on these incidences, and we'll take all instances of hate and discrimination extremely seriously. And that's been our stance. This applies right across the board to all our religious affiliations.
Just to add, because I know the grant just came out for religious organizations and others to ask for money for the infrastructure and the security for race-based crimes. So come talk to me afterwards. Yeah, private schools.
Okay, thank you. We'll do the last question just here, and then we'll close it up.
Thank you. Mayor, this sort of leverages on what we discussed very briefly before, and also a density question that came up.
Yep.
So just background, we were talking about our concerns about the 60-story towers on Westney, and our specific concern that we mentioned to you was the idea that you used, I don't know if I'm paraphrasing,
Strong mayor powers.
superpowers
Yep.
or whatnot. And
Superpowers,
you said,
yeah.
you're super granted. And you said that in part, again paraphrasing, that might have been in relation to the fact that some councillors are worried about being reelected as opposed to moving forward with growth and, starting off with this tower being something you wanted to carefully look at and build something bigger, and then we would move forward, in kind. Two things. One, I think as someone who does communicate with my counselor fairly frequently, we are able to elevate our concerns, as I said, where are the extra schools, where are the extra hospitals, because we're not seeing that, right? We know there's a need for housing, but there's also, we think it should be balanced with a desire for a quality of life, maintaining that, right, for services that can respond to things. But when you have increased population and other things are not exponentially increasing. So I guess there's so many levels of questions to this, but I guess the question is, I understand there's a push on municipalities from above for intensification and densifying certain areas, and that makes sense because I don't want farmlands plowed under either, but how do you marry that then when we have concerns about, we want that, but we're not seeing the other services
Okay.
being
Let me do my
incorporated?
best to unpack that
I know,
very
it's kind of a,
large question. You're talking about 190 Westney Road, which is in what's called our MTSA, our what's it called? Something transit service area, major transit station area around the GO station. These are areas through our municipal comprehensive review at the region, which has taken 6 years, have been established for high density. And I think what I was referring to was, I didn't want this to be a political decision. This has to be a decision on what is the best for moving forward. And that's why I kind of took that my own through the strong mayor powers to get that through, because we have an official plan that's about 20 years old. It's going to be going through a full update next year, but our official plan says the maximum height for buildings in Ajax is 25 stories. And 20 years ago, when that was established, maybe that was the right height. But now, a lot of things have changed. We have a fixed urban boundary. We can't go out. We have Pickering to the north, Greenbelt to the north, Pickering to the west, Greenbelt to the east, and Whitby, and then the lake to the south. So we can only go up. We have a finite amount of land, and we have certain targets we need to meet as far as housing, as far as employment, as far as a number of other things, according to our official plan. This, in the MTSA, was the first application, and I felt it very important that it be done right, because if this was done based on staff's recommendation, which no disrespect to staff, and I was very clear with them on this. This is not personal. This is not me against staff. This is a business decision. The regional official plan is going to be done next year. I can't have this decision made that all further decisions are probably going to be measured on in that area based on the old rules. And we couldn't wait a year for them to do it for the new rules. We need these things now. So I did use the strong mayor powers. I believe I was the first one in the province to do so. And it's still passed in a majority. So it's still passed. I technically didn't need to use strong mayor powers to do it, but the reason why I did was because staff are restricted just based on what the official plan says today, their staff report would have been negative. That staff report would have been not supporting the development as applied. And that was, to me, the wrong thing to do. So I made sure that it was done what I felt was right. Council agreed with me because it was done through majority, and that 60-story zoning and official plan amendment were approved. To the infrastructure, we don't do schools and we don't do hospitals. The province is responsible for the hospitals and the school board trustees for the schools. And they decide after the fact, especially with schools, where those schools need to be based on population, because when things are built, they don't know how many kids are going to live there. They don't know any of that information, so they're not going to build a school on spec. They're going to wait until they know what those numbers are, and then they're going to put a school in that area. So that might not be the answer you want, but that's the answer I have on the logic behind it. The logic for these areas, especially in the MTSA, is to provide pedestrian-friendly, right by the GO station. We're counting on less people having cars. That building has a lower parking ratio, but it also had things like ride sharing. So there'll be 25 cars in there that you can sign out. If you live there, you sign out an EV and you take it and use it, and then when you come back, you sign it back in. That's part of your agreement. So you don't need to own a car. There's 680 bicycle storage spots in that building. That building will have, in the main podium, some type of grocery store that will have daycare. It will have all those amenities that people will need. So if they're in that building, they don't need to get in their car and go to the grocery store to shop. They can shop right there. They can drop their kids off at daycare, walk right, get on the GO train, go right into Toronto. That's the sort of theory. And that's sort of what we're looking at through these high-density areas going ahead. So, and I think that's all the time we have. We're 11 minutes past. I want to be respectful of the chief's time as well. You probably haven't had dinner yet. I just want to thank everybody. I'll let you want to make a couple of remarks first?
I just want to thank everybody as well for coming. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to all of you. Public safety is a cooperative, like I said, and this is really healthy for our communities. Inspector Sean Carter is your inspector here in Ajax Pickering. And I encourage you, if you have any follow-up questions as a result of this, to connect with him at 19 Division. You can call our non-emergency number and just ask for Inspector Carter, and you will speak with him. Thank you so much.
Sean Carter, who spells his name the correct way.
Yeah, it's true.
Yes, S-H-A-U-N. I just want to advise you of a couple of things that are coming up. So first of all, again, thank you everyone for coming, taking the time tonight. Feel free, I'll stay around and answer a few questions after if we didn't get to everybody. There's a few things coming up. I just wanted to let you know, we are still recruiting now for the Anti-Racism Task Force. If that's something that anybody is interested in getting involved in, that's going to run until November the 6th, ajax.ca/anti-racism. So please look into that. Nobody's on it yet. We're recruiting members, so if you're interested in that, we would love to see you put your name forward. Annual Santa Claus Parade coming up November 25th from 6 to 7:30, going down Bailey and Mackenzie to Town Hall. Our Family New Year's Eve party coming on December the 31st. And this Friday, the St. Francis Center is hosting an Encanto sing-along, is that right? I don't know what that
The
is.
Disney movie Encanto.
Oh, okay. That's what. See, I don't have young kids anymore. So, please reach out to myself, your local councils, or town staff if you have any questions. And thank you so much once again, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you, everyone.